when it comes to the review process, one of the things that I try to harp on these trainings is the importance of just thinking strategically, not only about how you're going to go about your review process. I always recommend a quote like an internal meet and confer for anyone who's on the review team for a case, just to sit down and say, okay, what are the most important things in this case that we're looking for? How do we want to go about finding them? Are there specific search terms we should be using? What custom coding should we set up beforehand? And I'll talk about this more when we get to the custom coding and how you can go about setting it up. But thinking strategically about how you can set up your review beforehand and be a little bit more hyper targeted in that approach, and having everyone on the same page is going to make it so much easier for everyone involved in the process and make things go much more smoothly. Because if you have half the team looking for something for these issues and half the team looking for the other issues, and they don't really know what they're looking for or where, it can be kind of all over the place. So just want to share best practices as we're going through this. But while we are done with the analytics tab, I'm going to move back over to the review tab, which is where you're going to be spending the vast majority of your time reviewing, which is what aptly named tabs. But I want to quickly talk about the relationship between folders and documents, because it's not the same for all Ediscovery softwares, and it's certainly not the same as the way things are in real life. So if I click into any folder or run any search, again, it takes us to the grid view. And one of the things that I want to point out is that, like in the real world, so you can see there's a lot of folders that these documents are tagged to. But in the real world, if you had a single document that pertained to multiple issues in your case, and you wanted to have like manila folders that pertain to each different issue, in order for that document to be pertained to multiple issues, you would have to make a copy of that document and place it in those different folders. Same thing on your local computer. If you're taking it and putting it into different folders, you're going to have to actually make a copy of it. It's going to take additional storage space on your computer. And in all likelihood, because of the way that that process is created, you're going to end up reviewing those documents more than once as you go through those different folders. And that's not necessarily the case here for Nextpoint, because you can see that this document is tagged to one folder. These documents are tagged to 5+ folders. This one's tagged to 4 folders. But let's say this PDF entitled a bunch of numbers. Let's say that even though it's tagged to 4 different documents, it's not copied 4 different times. Any changes I make to this document, coding wise or otherwise, are going to be reflected across any of those folders. So let's say I code this document as responsive for wrongful termination and not privileged. That's going to be reflected in all of the folders that this is tagged in, not just so that you don't have to review that document more than once. It'll be in the initial batch folder that it was imported in. It might be in a custodian folder. It might be in a search term folder that you added. It might be in a date range folder as well. Like all of these different folders where it hit on that search syntax and you added them to that folder to kind of organize it. Once you review it once, you don't have to review it again. And one of the ways that I like to point out to people of being effective in going about your review process is, let's say we've got these 630 documents. I've already coded 70 of them as responsive. I don't want to waste my time looking at these documents that I've already looked at. So I'm just going to click into the 560 that I have not yet reviewed. It builds out that search syntax, and all of these documents are documents that have not yet been reviewed for relevancy. And I can go in, start viewing them one by one and coding them along the way, so that I don't have to worry about, oh, I've already coded this document. So that's just a big thing that I want to make sure. I always want to make sure that the folders make sense, because folders are really the bread and butter of the organizational structure here in Nextpoint. There's a bunch of different ways you can create them. You can create them upon import. You can create them via bulk actions, like I've shown you how to do. You can create them right here. You can also create them in settings, folders, add new. And the reason for all these different ways to create them is just how instrumental and pivotal they are to the actual review process and organizing yourself.